Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 107 of the Online Tennis Podcast, joined by John Silk today to discuss the US Open Women's Singles Championships. We are going to talk about Coco Gauff's win over Aryna Sabalenka in particular, maybe touch a little bit on the new world number two, Iga Swiatek. I think we'll start with the final, what it all means for Gauff. First things first, John. Another 19-year-old winning a Grand Slam. Does it feel different this time?
Not, not sort of yes, sort of no. I don't have my little book with me at hand right now where I wrote down the ages of the US Open winners since Sloane Stephens, and maybe even including Sloane Stephens' win in 2017. That she was 24, and the rest since then have been 22 and under. So, for whatever reason, the US Open at the moment is rewarding not just one-time winners. Or when I say one-time, I mean I know Osaka's come back again, but someone not to retain it, but also rewarding youth for whatever reason. Maybe it's the conditions, maybe it's the weather, maybe it's just a quirk of nature or stats. But I did think about that as the tournament wore on, and I was looking at the ages of Sabalenka in particular and Keys especially, of course. And just going, well, if they're going to buck the trend. I mean, Sabalenka's 25, by the way, so she's not getting on. But so that's the first thing. Secondly, landscape of tennis changing. Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things that would suggest that. First of all, I think if we look back at that 15-year-old Coco who beat Venus and then had peaks and troughs for a couple of years, and we were like, yeah, that's fine, that's normal. She's still going to be amazing. And I also see that development I was just talking about with her and her game, but then there was probably about 18 months, 2 years where it would be like, oh, okay, there is sort of a limit or a ceiling right now. And the optimists or the whatever, the people saying, listen, just fine, it's still okay. But I guess with every sort of big-ish match defeat at quarterfinals to Iga a year ago in New York, and also to Iga at the French Open in the final. People looked at the draw, and then I met Coco in Madrid this year. She tried to put a positive spin on her season thus far, and she was saying actually last year was going probably even worse, and I ended up getting to the French Open final. And she was talking about bigger picture stuff, and I was like, okay, maybe she's sort of, as we all do, especially to the media, we sort of maybe say one thing, but maybe privately we're quite concerned. Renee Stubbs as well. I remember after the French Open, I think it was, or maybe just before, actually, was obviously talking about the forehand and what could and should improve. And then Wimbledon came, and the first round exit to Kenin. So it's then sort of, as I say, a year, 18 months of, oh, okay. Now, I don't think you or I were necessarily worrying, and when someone's 19, they've still got 2, 3 more, 4 years before we would start even probably panicking a little bit. But I still don't think any of us, after that Wimbledon defeat, were going, yeah, you just wait until we get to Washington and Brad Gilbert's on board. And I'm not going to overplay the Brad significance, but possibly, I think on the court, during the matches, little or nothing. Even if certain coaches probably like to think this is when they come alive, because they probably
Yeah.
see all sorts of coaches in other sports going, oh, okay, I need to be like that, and I need to show the cameras and stuff. But actually, their best work, and probably Brad's best work, does in fact come on the practice court. And well, we saw it. And one more thing with Coco's run, I would suggest, was that she had that match against Lauda Sigmund in the first round, and I thought going into that match, this is the pressure one. This is now you're coming in as a 500 and 1,000 winner, and people are talking about you, as being a potential winner, probably for the first time. That sort of excitement, and they will have all known Coco. I mean, Flushing Meadow is in a more, let's say, less elite part of New York compared to where Roland Garros and Wimbledon in particular are. So you do get a good crowd there, if you like, and she would have felt that expectation. I think that was possibly partly why she found it quite difficult against Lauda at times. I mean, there's other reasons that were going on the other side of the court, but we'll leave that for another time. But she came through it, and I thought, okay, now we're okay. Now we're fine until the quarters or the semis. It's not going to be. She's not going to be vulnerable like that. I don't think anymore. And she handled it with aplomb. I mean, there were sticky moments against Wozniacki. Mukova was a real semi-final test for her as well, but she came through that. It wasn't the tidiest of performances, I would say, from 5-1 up in that semi-final in the first set, but she came through it, and she was the better player. She handled the occasion better than her opponent as well. And then the final. Well, for me, it's probably a sort of very short analysis in that it was kind of attack against defense. But I think in a lot of sports we look at defense as being not that exciting, but actually defense in tennis is so exciting because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, wow, they got a racket on that. How did they do that? And it's gone over the net and it's landed with depth, and you're like, wow, and if they do that over and over again and they're doing it against somebody as powerful as Aryna, and we will of course come to Aryna and maybe one or two things that didn't quite work out for her in a second, but it was a great final for those reasons.
Loads to say there. Loads to say there. Trying to think of where to start. First thing, obviously, for those who aren't aware, touched on Brad Gilbert there. What did he actually add to the golf game? Of course, she went out to Sophia Kenin, as he touched on at Wimbledon. There was apparently an interim where Brad joined the team, helped her out with a few things, specifically her confidence. And I would argue, right, they've been working on the aggression on the forehand, trying to get her a bit more set for that shot. But this final was not made up of those improvements. It was made up of Coco Gauff playing the defensive tennis she knows how to play best. It wasn't because of all these improvements that she won that final. It was just because of Coco Gauff. Like
True.
she played she was allowed to play her best game.
I saw her play also in Madrid, and the confidence was just shot. It was against Paula Badosa, and it was uncomfortable to watch, and it was uncomfortable because of the psychological issue of just dealing with forehand after forehand. And I wasn't the only person. There were other people in the press box that were saying, "Oh, this is getting awkward now," and it was a straight sets loss. And
Yeah.
yeah,
It could have been much trickier if it hadn't been somebody like Sabalenka on the other side of the net, who's going to dictate the outcome of most points, right? And let Coco Gauff play a much more passive defensive game. Now, the third set was fantastic in terms of defense, one of the best performances we've seen defensively throughout the entirety of the year. But I would say Gauff didn't get pressurized as much as I would have liked. Had she played somebody else that didn't go for every shot quite as big, could have been a stickier final. But Gauff did a very good job of playing within herself, playing her own game, and she did deserve to come through. Overall, though, throughout the tournament, there were moments, as you say, against Siegemund and stuff, where I think the Gauff of old would have struggled, and those improvements did come to the fore, where Brad has told her to go for her serve a bit more. So she's actually double faulting a bit more than she used to. She used to double fault a lot at the start of her career, had a little dip where she didn't double fault, and now she's back to double faulting because she's got a bit more aggressive intent on the second serve. So it's a positive change, the fact she's
yeah,
double faulting. And it's the same in the forehand as well. If the other person thinks, oh, just sit back a bit, let Coco try and dictate play with her forehand, she does have the ability now to change the dynamic of the match if the other person is passive enough. Hence the wins against Siegemund and Wozniacki in 3 sets. Right.
yeah,
But just looking at the final, Gauff was allowed to play her own game. There was a very good chance for Sabalenka to win it in that second set. Gauff did a really good job of defending on that tail end of that second set into the third set, and it was enough. Gauff actually touched on it, John. The way she played, she said she would have liked to have been hitting winners. She said running around the court is fun, but it's not as fun as hitting winners. And she was alluding to the fact that Sabalenka doesn't really let you play the way she would have wanted to. I guess she played the game that has got her to this stage in her career, but she's trying to develop herself into a more aggressive opponent, right? And she didn't have to do that. She wasn't tested. Sabalenka didn't say, "Oh, you've been working with Brad Gilbert to get yourself a little bit more aggressive. Let's see that." She just said, "Play your game, Coco. Is it good enough to beat my game?" Basically, she's always going to play that. Sabalenka will have the regret that she didn't execute better. I think this
yeah,
is the segue, right? How did
yeah.
you feel about the Sabalenka performance?
Just one more thing on Coco as well, but it is kind of linked to Sabalenka. Is You were talking about the defense and having to run a lot and how she would like to have hit a few more winners. Well, at least she finished it with a winner. That was a nice one because she was running all over the court and the position for the win. It was quite an easy winner, although that's not quite so easy on match point. But it was on the Sabalenka serve, which I think maybe also helped because I think Coco tried to serve it out, didn't she? And that didn't work out. But she then
Yeah.
got kind of like the re-break, although it's not really termed that way. Bear in mind, she won the match there. But it was one of those points where she is running around everywhere, but she managed to finish it with a backhand winner. So back of old, if you like. Sabalenka, yeah, I would just go with the execution. You might have some points regarding the matchup and the way Coco could play. Might have been a bit trickier for Sabalenka than other opponents, are also more positive for Coco. But for a set and a bit, it was looking fine. And I just look at Sabalenka now in that these defeats are sort of okay. I'm not. I don't. I know Aryna doesn't feel that way, of course, but I think bigger picture, 4 Grand Slams this year, 2 semi-finals, probably should have won one or both. A Grand Slam final in the runners-up scenario as we've got here, and there will be some regrets there, but and won the other one. And I know Nick is somebody that tweeted out something a couple of days ago like, oh, okay, we're gonna have a big two next year, and it's just you're gonna see Coco and Iga Don, mate. I do not see that at all. I see far too much talent and big game temperament and abilities across all surfaces from Sabalenka and Rybakina. I see, Iga, of course, albeit that the grass might continue to be an issue for her. And then, of course, you've got Ons, who will have her days and her moments, especially on the natural surfaces. I just don't. I don't see the same as Nick, if you like, with those two now going to have a 2024 to just sort of tear it all up. I think there's so much depth and quality. And then even when you go to the next layer of Pegula and Mukova as well. And I hope for Mukova that her time will continue, if you like, because she's obviously had a pretty good year, especially in terms of the slams. So yeah, it's great news for women's tennis, and it's great news for the depth. And on Sabalenka, I sort of look at it as a sort of a neutral observer. I was kind of pulling for her in Australia just because she hadn't got over the line. Now she has. I still love to watch her play because she's so aggressive in that style of hers. But bigger picture, no problem. Yeah,
Mhm.
she'll win Grand Slams. She'll not win Grand Slams. She'll win Grand Slams with this style of tennis, and she won't. But there'll be a lot of players that come off the court like Kazatkina did, and I think the fourth round, or that could have been the quarterfinal, where they're just coming off the court going, I just can't compete with this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the tour will be like that. And
Yeah.
that's why she gets to semi-finals of Grand Slams on such a persistent, and she's so good across the four surfaces. She'll
Yeah.
probably win another slam next year.
I think so. You don't make 5 semi-finals in a row without some kind of reliable game under your belt, right?
Mm.
So although she lost her way a little bit, there's still a very reliable performance in Sabalenka every match. That's just are a high enough base level that she's going to give herself a good chance against anybody in the world.
Yeah.
She did say, she's still having these issues playing against herself, but it does tend to come at the latter stages, and the more she gets to those latter stages, the more experience she's going to get. So I really do believe in her game. I think she will patch it up
You know
going
what I would
forward.
say with this point though, Jack, is
Mm-hmm.
so does everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So does your opponent. You know,
Yeah,
you can't tell me that Coco, even this year, hasn't had those doubts filling her mind. You can't say that Iga didn't have it at times as well, and moments of frustration in Australia in particular, but even in the French Open final. Everybody does. And now, unlike the narrative pre-Australia, whereas she has them more, now she's just a human being, just like everybody else on the tour in that respect.
yeah. I'd make a little side note as well that there's one thing I would like to see Sabalenka improve. I think the forehand and backhand will sort themselves out the more she gets used to those pressure moments. I'd like to see her finishing off at the net a little bit more clinically. There was a lot of moments in that Gauff match. Now, Gauff is a proper disruptor when you come forward, to be fair, but there are still a few ones that you were kind of like, that's a gimme, and it could have made a big difference actually if she managed to put away a few of those. But that's a little side note. Gauff certainly is going to. I think she's got a good enough game base level wise, confidence oozing from her at the moment that she will be able to keep contesting in most of the slams. I do still feel like, this is my segue again, Iga Swiatek will have the one up in that matchup. I do think this loss to Ostapenko is probably the exception rather than the rule. Although I will just say she's still struggling against those big flat hitters, people that can take time away from her, rush that forehand a little bit better than other players. This wasn't a terrible loss for Iga. As I say, anybody who knows Iga's matchup problems, this 100% could have happened. I was saying about 60-40 maybe in Iga's favour, if that, before hand going into the match.
She gets someone else in the fourth round and she could have won the tournament. It could have happened.
Yeah, exactly, because I still think the Gauff matchup's tough. I know Gauff beat her in Cincinnati, but I do think Gauff is the clear underdog going into that matchup every single time. So I think for Iga, she actually was quite relieved that the number one streak had finished in a way. She mentioned the fact that she always is going onto the court looking to win rather than defend, titles, streaks, points. She's not looking to match her performance of old. She's always looking to rewrite her story basically, and I think that's a really, really healthy way of framing it, and something that a lot of fans have just failed to do. And it affects these players quite a lot. So many of them, Casper Ruud, Coco Gauff, talking about tennis Twitter in particular this tournament. They know the usernames, is what Coco Gauff said. There's a lot of negative press and fan interaction, and it can all add up. And clearly, Swiatek was a little bit exhausted. So I think this might be a blessing in disguise, John.
Yeah. A nice tweet as well from her, congratulating both finalists. Obviously, Coco on her win, and she also, framed it as in great win, Coco, and congratulations, Aryna, on becoming world number one. Aryna responded, I think, earlier on today with, big thanks or hugs or whatever, which I think is also nice and hopefully puts to bed any nonsense about there being too much needle between Iga and Aryna, because I think they're more or less, they're fine. They're not necessarily going out drinking every night together, but they're fine. There's no big deal there.
Yeah. One actually slightly controversial point, I will say. I don't think it's a guarantee that Gauff is contesting for every title next year. I do think, as you say, Rybakina and Sabalenka, these sort of power games probably are going to be tough for her to continuously overcome.
True.
And if she does keep running into those two players in particular, and Iga, those three, I don't know why I didn't mention Iga there, those three players, the odds are going to be stacked against her. So I do think she's a little bit of an unfinished product. There's still stuff that she could
definitely. Aryna Sabalenka, as you just touched on, is not a finished product. And this is where the greats come in, and the multiple slam winners, if you like, come in.
Yeah, exactly. Loads of them. Everybody on the tour and the men's tour, maybe bar Novak, could make improvements to their game, obviously, but egregiously so for Gauff, who actually in some matchups is still going to struggle quite a lot, despite the fact she's still won the US Open. So I do think if she wants to keep challenging for every title, keep working on that aggressive forehand, keep working on the intent on the serve, which did go ropey in some of her matches. And again, closing out matches, it's the same sort of thing. She isn't able to hit through the ball quite as much, so she got broken serving for like every single set she played almost in the last 2 rounds. So don't quite count your chickens yet. Congratulations, Coco, for doing it in 19. Obviously, let's just stress that the fact she is still 19. It might not come immediately, all these amazing slam wins, but probably in the future when she is completely finished with her game. I think we'll see a Coco Gauff and Iga Swiatek rivalry for the ages, John.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for joining me again for this US Open Women's Tournament review. If you want to catch any of John's work, go to Talking Tennis Please on YouTube. You'll catch me there sometimes, I'm sure. Go to YouTube.
Sometimes. Sometimes. Thankfully, you're there a lot.
And if you want to give us a like and a subscribe, it might help the channel a little bit too. Thanks very much, guys. We'll catch you next time on the On the Line Tennis Podcast. Cheers. Thanks, John.
Thank you.